entities that me and my neighbors had to deal with back in 2005. Moved into a house in the Outback of South Australia in 2005. Pretty much every single person living on our street had only been there for under 5 years, apart from an elderly couple that lived at the end of the street. This elderly couple had lived on the street for 40 years and had raised their children on that street. They said strange things happened there, and a lot of people can't handle it and leave. They never really went into what scared people, just saying the whole street was haunted or something like that. But they did say it only started happening in the early 90s. First experience I had was a week after moving in. I heard a low-pitched humming noise coming from outside my bedroom window. I saw this tall black figure with long arms and long fingers, with no facial features. He was slightly transparent. He was backed up against the wall that holds up the garage of my house. Due to his height, he had to hunch over. I was looking out for around 5 seconds before I realized I was looking at it. It turned its head towards me, and I quickly ran away from the window and told my parents. My dad went out and saw there was nothing there. I sketched what I saw, Pick-related. I started hanging out with the neighborhood kids. We were all teenagers at the time, and they told me their stories. They all described the same figures I had seen. One of the kids was Aboriginal, and we would go visit his grandfather a lot. He called the entities Malevolent, which translated roughly to stranger man. He said that the Aboriginals in the area had been dealing with them for a long time before the arrival of Europeans, and said they weren't of the land, which kind of meant they didn't belong there or weren't native to there, and that they would take children away and eat them. He said the Aboriginals cast them behind a creek, but since the creek had partially dried up, the Malevolent had once again been able to get into the town. The town that I lived in was built directly over the previous Aboriginal settlement. The Aboriginal tribe wasn't nomadic and had remained in the small area for over 1,000 years. One day me and my friends were playing cricket out on the flat patch of desert in between the road and my house. The sun was setting, and as we were packing up our stuff, we noticed that there were people off in the distance approaching the road. The closer they got, the more details we could see, and we noticed that they were fully black, tall, and that they weren't walking, but floating. We could also hear a low-pitched humming sound that got louder the closer they got. We bolted back to my house and told my parents, but my parents once again didn't believe us. I hassled my father enough to drive down on his motorbike to the area we saw them. After 9 minutes, he came back to the house visibly shaken, saying he saw them, and I wasn't to go down there anymore. Every time I tried to get details on what happened, he would always change the subject. One night I was coming home from a party with my friends, and as we passed an empty lot in the street, we saw 2 small figures sitting on tree stumps, just staring at us. One was bigger than the other, and once again we heard a low-pitched humming sound. We were all high as bleep, and were just standing there, laughing, thinking we were tripping until we realized that we were all seeing the exact same thing, and we couldn't all be hallucinating the same thing. One of my mates took a step forward towards the one closer to us, and when he did, it made this very deep growl. I've never heard anything like it, and to make a long story short, we screamed and ran to my house. I'm mentioning this because, unlike the tall figures I'd seen, and I'd seen them a lot at night, these things were completely physical and not transparent. They were shaped like babies, but didn't have a neck. Now this is where stuff heats up. There used to be a group of kids that would take their dirt bikes beyond the creek, and would go riding way out in the desert. One day they didn't come home and everyone assumed that they had gotten lost. They were found a week later, all 5 of them. They were alive, with no food and no water out in the Australian outback for a week. What scared me was what one of the kids' younger brother told me. He said that his brother said they saw a light out in the desert, and they felt compelled to follow it. He said he felt like he was in a trance, and they didn't stop following this light for an entire week. They were out in the outback. He said no matter how far they kept traveling, they didn't seem to get anywhere close to it. He said if the farmer that found them hadn't found them, they never would have stopped following the light, and eventually would have died. Anyway, getting to the final part of the story. So my mother had gotten sick of me being scared all the time, and called her sister who lived in Adelaide to come visit. She's a psychic or something. So she comes down, and the moment she pulls up, she tells us not to tell her anything what we've seen, and that she's going to wander around the street for a while and come back and tell us what she saw. When she came back, she was visibly shaken. She told me that these things were unlike anything she had experienced, and that she had also run into the spirit of an old Aboriginal woman. The woman told her that her tribe were a split-off group from the Tharwal, and came to the area that would become the town I lived in to escape the Malevolent, but the Malevolent followed them. The woman then showed her horrific images of these things slaughtering Aboriginal children and eating them through the small slit in their mouth. The woman then told her she drowned herself in a creek, so she would act as a spiritual barrier to keep the Malevolent out. She said this worked until a pyramid-shaped pathway was built, facing the way the Malevolent had come from. This allowed them to come in once again, not the fact that the creek had dried up. The Aboriginal woman led my auntie down a path to show her something even more terrifying. After eating the small children, they would rebirth these kids to be their minions or something. My auntie said these beings are completely physical, live out in the desert, and sometimes come into the town for food. She said these things are harmless, and mainly just keep an eye on people for the Malamula. My auntie became confused, and said if they were killing children to make them into spies, then what was their motive in the first place? It was explained to her that the Malamula just seemed intent on inflicting pain and suffering on people. She said they SA women and men alike, make women miscarry, cause accidents, and kill the weak. Despite this, they seem to have a personal vendetta against the Aboriginal woman's tribe, and seem intent on wiping them out. This is why they remain focused on the town. My auntie came to the conclusion that the Malamula aren't human spirits, and aren't spirits at all. She believed that they were a physical, reproducing race of beings that are most likely aliens. She said she heard of similar beings all around the world. After hearing all this, we put the house on the market and began preparations to leave. A couple of days before we left, I went on one last motorbike ride where my father had told me not to go. While riding along the dirt path, I saw this rock on the side. It was weird because it looked like it was smoothed down a bit and had some markings on it. I don't know if it's related at all to what had been happening. I personally think it's someone playing a joke because none of the engravings on it are Aboriginal, and the engravings on it are all over the place. Anyways, I took it with me when we moved, pic related. So yeah, this is my experience with the paranormal. I thought I'd share it with you, and it'd be great if someone else has an experience like this they could share. Here's the rock with the engravings outlined.